So, Eckhart, I know you're a great spiritual teacher in modern times, touching millions of people with your wisdom. I've been quite fascinated by your work. Today, I'd love to explore with you one of humanity's greatest questions. What is the meaning of life? This question has intrigued philosophers and spiritual seekers for centuries. Before I share my own perspective, I'm curious, what would you say is the true meaning of human existence? What are we really here for?
The meaning of human existence? Yes, a profound question indeed. From what I've observed, the primary purpose of human life is awakening, becoming conscious of who you truly are, beyond the stream of thinking, beyond the ego-constructed identity. Most people live their entire lives trapped in thought, identified with their personal history, their problems, their conceptual sense of self. They mistake the ripple for the ocean. The purpose of life is to realize that you are the ocean, not just the ripple.
Ah, I see. So you're saying the meaning comes through an awakening to a deeper reality beneath our ordinary thinking. Now, I find that quite interesting because I approach it slightly differently. You see, I believe the meaning of life is that you are the meaning. The universe is a unified system, and what we call you is what the whole universe is doing at a particular point. Your soul isn't confined to your body. It's the entire cosmic pattern centered at your body. So there's nothing to wake up from because you've never been asleep. You're already it.
Yes, I see the similarity in our perspectives. We're both pointing to something beyond the separate self. But you see, Alan, while we may already be the ocean, most people don't experience themselves that way. They're caught in what I call the pain body and the egoic mind. Their attention is completely absorbed by thought, by mental stories about past and future. They've lost touch with the dimension of being.
That's a fascinating point about experience, Eckhart. I wonder, though, couldn't we say this whole game of forgetting and remembering who we are is part of the cosmic dance? After all, what would be the fun if we all realized we're the universe from the beginning? It's like the universe is playing hide and seek with itself. The meaning isn't just in remembering who we are, but in the marvelous game of temporarily forgetting.
There is truth in what you're saying about the game of forgetting and remembering. But for someone caught in deep suffering, in anxiety, depression, conflict, it doesn't feel like a game. They need a way out of that suffering, and that way is through presence, through a shift in consciousness, from being lost in thought to being aware of thought from a deeper dimension.
I completely understand that practical concern for suffering, Eckhart. Perhaps that's where our approaches complement each other. I try to give people the cosmic perspective that they are the whole works playing at being separate, and you offer them the practical method of stepping out of thought through presence. Both roads lead to Rome, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would agree. Different approaches for different temperaments, perhaps. Some people respond to the cosmic perspective. Others need a more practical approach to finding liberation from suffering. The important thing is recognizing that what we truly are is not confined to the boundaries of our physical form or our personal history.
Exactly. And isn't that realization the most extraordinary thing? The moment when you see that the you that you've been so worried about is actually the entire cosmos playing a magnificent game. That's why I often say life is a musical thing, and we are supposed to dance while the music is being played, not stand on the sidelines wondering what it all means.
The dance, yes. But what I've observed is that many people aren't dancing. They're struggling, suffering. They're so completely absorbed in their problems that they can't hear the music at all. They first need to find that space of inner stillness where the incessant voice in the head subsides. Then the dance becomes possible.
I'm wondering, Eckhart, if the very search for stillness might sometimes reinforce the illusion of separation. I'm here trying to be still, and presence is over there. Whereas if you realize you're already the whole show, there's nothing to achieve. The universe has nothing to fall onto. Everything is already perfectly in place, even the seeking, even the suffering.
That's an important point, Alan. The search itself can become another activity of the ego if we're not careful. That's why I emphasize that presence is not something you can achieve or work toward. It's a recognition of what's already here. It's stepping out of time into the now, which is the only place life actually happens.
The now. Yes. We're touching on the same truth from different angles. I talk about the universe as a unified system, where every point is the center, and you speak of the eternal now, where time dissolves. I wonder, Eckhart, do you think most people are afraid of this truth, afraid to discover they're not a separate self after all?
Yes, there is a fear there. The ego, the false self, is frightened of its own demise. It creates enormous resistance to the present moment, because deep down it knows that in true presence it cannot survive. That's why people keep their minds constantly busy, to avoid that confrontation with their deeper nature.
I've noticed that too. There's something almost comical about it. We're terrified of being exactly what we already are. It's like the universe is playing an elaborate joke, having temporarily convinced itself that it's just a tiny fragment called me, and then being afraid to discover its true identity.
And that realization itself can bring a sense of humor to the spiritual journey. I often find myself smiling at the absurdity of the human condition. How we create our own suffering through thought. How we resist the very life that we are. There is a cosmic humor in it all.
Absolutely. That's what I call the cosmic giggle. The moment when you see through the whole charade and just have to laugh. Life doesn't need justification or meaning from something else. It's playful by its very nature. Like music, we don't play music to get to the end of the piece. We play to play.
I like that analogy of music. We're not here to get anywhere, and yet there is an evolution of consciousness happening. The universe is awakening to itself through human beings. But that awakening doesn't happen in the future. It can only happen now, in this moment.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. The universe awakening to itself through us. I often use the image of a flower opening. The universe is flowering as human consciousness. And yes, it's all happening right now, eternally now. There's no final destination, just this eternal unfolding.
And to participate consciously in that unfolding is perhaps the deepest meaning we can find. To be aware not just as a person with a history, but as the space of consciousness itself, the aware presence in which all of life happens.
I think many of our listeners might be wondering, how does this understanding change how we live? If the meaning of life is that we are the meaning, how does that transform our daily existence? What do you think, Eckhart?
It transforms everything, Alan. When you no longer derive your sense of self from thought and personal history, a different dimension of consciousness emerges. Your actions arise from presence rather than psychological need. There's less struggle, less resistance to what is. You don't stop functioning in the world. You might still have goals and plans, but you no longer look to the future for fulfillment or salvation.
Yes, and there's a tremendous lightness that comes with that. When you're no longer desperately trying to secure your future or atone for your past, life becomes much more of a dance and less of a battle. There's a wonderful verse from a Chinese text that says, "When the wrong man uses the right means work in the wrong way. But when the right man, the awakened man, uses even the wrong means, they work in the right way.
That lightness is a good sign. Many spiritual seekers become very heavy and serious about their seeking, which is a sure sign that the ego has co-opted the spiritual journey. True awakening brings lightness, simplicity, and often, as you say, a sense of humor about the human condition.
I'm curious, Eckhart. In your experience working with so many people, what's the most common obstacle people face in recognizing who they really are? What keeps this simple truth from being obvious to everyone?
The most common obstacle is the habitual identification with thinking. The stream of thought is so compelling, so continuous for most people that they never step out of it. They believe they are their thoughts. Breaking this identification, even for a moment, is the beginning of awakening. That's why I emphasize simple practices like feeling the aliveness of your hands or listening to silence. Anything that brings attention out of thought.
That's a crucial insight. We mistake the chatter in our heads for who we are, never noticing the awareness in which that chatter appears. It's like mistaking the news announcer for the television set. But I wonder, isn't there also something about our culture that reinforces this misidentification? A collective agreement to pretend we're just isolated individuals?
Absolutely. Our entire culture is structured around the image of the separate self. Success means personal success. Achievement means personal achievement. Even spiritual awakening can be misunderstood as something I achieve. The collective madness of society makes it more difficult for individuals to awaken from the dream of separation.
Yes. It's almost as if we've collectively agreed to ignore the obvious fact that we're all expressions of a unified cosmos. We're playing a game of let's pretend we're separate so convincingly that we've forgotten it's a game. But that forgetfulness itself is part of the game, isn't it? The whole thing has to be compelling, or it wouldn't be worth playing.
That's an interesting perspective, seeing the collective forgetting as part of the cosmic game. Perhaps there is a purpose to this forgetting and remembering cycle. Perhaps the universe experiences itself more fully through this process of apparent separation and reunion.
I think that's it exactly. Just as a great drama needs tension and resolution, the cosmic game needs this marvelous dance of separation and reunion. What would be the point of hide and seek if no one ever hid? The meaning of life includes both the forgetting and the remembering. The temporary illusion of being separate creates the joy of rediscovering our unity.
And perhaps that's why the experience of awakening is often described as a homecoming, a return to something we always knew but had forgotten. There's a recognition, not of something new, but of something eternally familiar.
Ah, yes, that feeling of, oh, that. Of course. How could I have ever forgotten? It's not gaining something you didn't have before. It's recognizing what was always the case. Like taking off a pair of distorting glasses you forgot you were wearing.
Yes, and that recognition can happen in an instant. It doesn't require years of spiritual practice, although practices can be helpful in weakening the identification with thought. But the actual shift in consciousness, from being trapped in thought to recognizing yourself as the awareness in which thought happens, that can occur in a moment.
So it seems that despite our different approaches, we're really pointing to the same fundamental truth, that who we really are is far more extraordinary than the limited self we normally identify with. And the meaning of life is bound up with this recognition, this homecoming to our true nature. Would you agree, Eckhart?
Yes, I would agree completely. The words and concepts we use may differ, but we're pointing to the same timeless truth that all the great spiritual teachings have pointed to, that our essential nature transcends the personal, the individual, the separate self. And finding that truth, living from that truth, is indeed the meaning and purpose of human existence.
Well then, perhaps we can conclude with this thought for our listeners. The meaning of life isn't something to be discovered out there somewhere. It's looking out through your eyes right now. You are the universe experiencing itself from a particular viewpoint. And when you recognize that, everything changes, while remaining exactly the same.
Beautifully put, Alan. I would simply add, don't take our word for it. Test it for yourself. Step out of the stream of thinking, even for a moment, and sense the presence that you are beneath all your thoughts and stories. That presence, that consciousness, is what you truly are, and finding that is coming home to yourself.
Well, I'll drink to that. Here's to the great cosmic game, and to all those who are just waking up to find they've been playing it all along. It was a pleasure talking to you, Eckhart. See you soon.
Talk to you soon, Alan.